The Lawyer Who Rocks is brought to you by Hughes Media Law Group. You can visit us at hmlglaw.com. Keep up with the podcast on social media at HMLG Law on all major platforms and be sure to follow us there. Thank you for listening and enjoy this episode of The Lawyer Who Rocks. Welcome to the season finale of The Lawyer Who Rocks. We have one final very special episode coming out on December 29th. Until then, we hope you have a great holiday season. Thank you for listening all year to The Lawyer Who Rocks, and we will see you next year. My name is Joleen Winther Hughes. I am a lawyer who rocks.
When it comes to having your back, there ain't nobody better. This you better believe. Joleen, you know
Today, I am super excited. I finally convinced her, and my guest is someone I know very, very well. She's my cousin, but she's also incredible because she's a diversity and inclusion expert, not only at her own consulting firm, but she's the vice president of inclusion and diversity at nVent. I'm so excited for my listeners to meet one of my favorite family members of all time, Laura Brock. Welcome.
Thank you. What a beautiful introduction. And I would have to say, favorite cousin of all time would be exactly how I would identify you too.
You have some really cool things that you did growing up that I have to get in because you're like the only person I know that did some of these things. So, where did you grow up?
Northern Minnesota, the Iron Range. So Eveleth, Hockey Hall of Fame, capital of the world at one point in time. But since population has changed, they've moved the Hockey Hall of Fame down to the new XL Energy Center with Minnesota Wildlife.
So, what brought you out to Seattle?
So, you know what? I was just looking for something different. I had the privilege, if you remember, your mom and dad invited me out over a holiday and just spent some time with all of you. And your dad has one of the biggest places in my heart. He loved fun, he loved adventure. And I don't think I have ever had a out of Minnesota experience, much like the one that your parents provided to me. And I didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And he had thought, oh, well, Laura, you should think about court reporting because this is so great because you know Hal. But as part of that, why didn't I think about it? And I still, was in high school at that point in time, but why didn't I get a better flavor? And I should come out and stay with you all over the summer and, babysit you and your sister Ro and kind of get a feel for it. So really blessed to have a couple of those experiences. I loved what I saw. And I knew that I probably would think about coming west to go to college when that time arrived.
You were basically putting yourself through school, right?
I was, yes. So it's all about connections. So we were fortunate enough to have a Blanky who lived across the street say she needed some help in the back room. So, when you have to put yourself through school, you're willing to do pretty much anything. And I was sort of grateful not to have to, maybe waitress, which I had a lot of background doing that most of us do when you're putting yourself through school. And the court reporting thing, I will tell you, I did finish, but I remember coming to your dad devastated, going, I hate it. He goes, well, how can you hate it? You can make all this money. And I'm like, you have to sit for 8 hours and just shut up. And I'm too extroverted for this. And Uncle Hal, I hate it. And he was so sweet and kind. It's like, well, what are you going to do? And I really didn't know what I wanted to do at that point in time. But, I was fortunate that, I had a pretty decent job. Nordstrom's was a decent salary paying job at that point in time. And I had finally worked myself out of, the warehouse stockroom onto the sales floor. So, that worked for me for a little bit until my life changed. As you know, I met my husband at Nordstrom's department store, and sort of the rest is, I don't want to say history, but on a personal level, the rest of that is a little bit of history.
Well, so obviously you've made this huge career over the past decades as just moving into diversity and teaching people about diversity and the importance of diversity. How did you get started into that?
I happened to be working for a big Fortune 100 company in the Twin Cities in the law department. But I had a boss who often reminded me of your dad, and his name was Hal, also, ironically, who really was about making sure that you had development experiences. So he'd throw me into these special projects, which now we laugh at because special projects sometimes means the kiss of death in an organization. But, I grew up in that time where that was a really good thing. And the organization was rolling out a huge diversity initiative, but their approach was very different. They were looking for employees to facilitate the dialogue about diversity 101 and 102. And so it was a very experiential, huge investment. It was a 2 full day training. We brought in a local theater company that did like a diversity play about all of the isms that happen in the workplace and in the community. And it was on full display. I mean, in a play form. And then we talked about it. And this was my special project. And I thought, are you nuts? I'm going to get in front of like hundreds of people and have these conversations. And then I thought, hey, you used to be a cheerleader. You can do this. I think he obviously saw something in me that I maybe wasn't willing to open up about, but it was the impetus of being able to realize that I get to lead this facilitation. I get to have a seat at the table for no other reason than the color of my skin. Nobody knows what my personal situation is. And sometimes I'm sad because people automatically make an assumption because you're a white woman, you're married to somebody of the same race. So they make commentary that is really contrary to, your experience or how you feel about it. So there was a lot of ouch and educate along the way. And at the same time as you're really meeting people where they are, and then you start to share your personal story, it gives them an entree into, oh my gosh, can I ask you these questions? So while painful, it was an amazing growth experience. I think it also really helped me be a better parent to a biracial child because they too were having their own exploration. And when my kids were born, there was no such thing on a census of 2 or more races. You were either Black or you were white, and it used to just absolutely make me outrageous. So, are you picking your mom or your dad? And, I think in that terms, there's been a nice evolution, but people just didn't talk about it. I would say this organization was way ahead of its time. That was the early 90s. Organizations weren't doing that then. I loved the work, and we were part of the law department. Diversity and inclusion rolled up through employment law. So it gave it a very different marketing opportunity internally. It wasn't an HR thing, check the box, it's over. It's everybody is responsible for their behavior. So, how do you mitigate risk in an organization for people behaving badly? So, when we put that frame of reference more from an employment law perspective of do the right thing, we were able to make a much greater impact.
Did you end up going back to school then?
I did. I did. I went back later in life again from the push from my boss who said, oh, yeah, you have to do this. So I ended up doing adult learning. I went back and got a degree in organizational development. And really, through my employer, because of the work I was doing, they sent me to Cornell University in New York to get a diversity certification. It was game changing. I learned a lot. I have a high level of respect for the training that I received. It was intense, it was brutal. But what I will say is having the privilege to have the personal experience going on at home, but it really gave me the confidence to have a louder voice.
What kind of training does that entail?
Everything from, not just racial diversity, but as you're aware, in the work that you do and how supportive you are, you know, Diversity covers a lot of different dimensions. Some of them you can change and some of them that you can't. But when you think about it from an organizational perspective, people want to work in areas where they feel valued, respected, and appreciated for what they bring to the table, not what they look like or what their ability is or what their orientation is. But a lot of others will lead and manage where that difference makes a difference in the way they lead and manage you. And I think the training that we went through, there was so much situational awareness. There was a lot of hands on exchange, a lot of real life role play. I guess that would be my word of how do you navigate this? I would say the training that I had gone through to become the facilitator with an organization that's no longer in business, but I'm still really super close to the CEO, that equipped me so well to think on my feet and to not be afraid to challenge regardless of who's saying something that's inappropriate, whether it's the CEO or a board of director member. Wrong is wrong. And I think that is probably where I started to be known as my favorite motto of feedback is a gift. You don't always have to embarrass someone publicly, but more of, may I offer you the gift of feedback? And, what you said was just inappropriate. And not only was it wrong, but it definitely impacts your brand and your reputation of what people are saying about you when you walk past us in the hallway. And I think that has been really helpful. I think it's allowed me to be more of that trusted advisor because I'm not afraid to say it. And you can't fix what someone doesn't tell you is broken. So rather than let people talk about someone behind their back for things that they say and do, offer them up the opportunity to change.
It's so ingrained. And why is it so ingrained? And that's something that I wonder what you think about because you have this training. I don't have the training that you do. I have just the observation. But you've been really working on this for so many years. How have you seen sort of that change or has it changed?
We have to weave it into the DNA. It just has to be who you are as an organization. It's in your policies, it's in your process, it's in your programs. I'm a big champion that the capital I inclusion comes before the D diversity. Because if you don't lead with an inclusive mindset, if your policies and practices aren't inclusive, you can have the D diversity, whatever dimension it is, any day of the week, and it's going to churn and come in the front door and go out the back door, whether it's employees or customers or clients, suppliers. If you don't have that inclusion embedded into everything you do and who you are and what you stand for, the rest is not sustainable. You can never build and grow on it. It'll always be flavor of the day.
I'd love to hear some of your experiences there and how they've informed your current job where it is such a new organization.
So probably where I cut my teeth was the organization who was doing this, way ahead of its time, is what I will say. So it was a good training platform. We were all in it together, we were all learning together. We started creating employee resource groups and really understanding the value that those groups can bring to an organization, not just from an employee engagement perspective, but building your best brand ambassadors to talk about your organization. And it's a leadership development opportunity for individuals who get to experience something different that they don't get in their functional day role. So all of that was really positive. And then you added, sort of the training capability. Everyone was starting to speak the same language. It was all good. I'll be super honest. I never thought I would leave that organization. I am a statistic. I didn't leave the organization. I left a people manager because I stopped feeling valued, respected, and appreciated. There was a change in some leadership structure, and I didn't feel that the person who was, my one over really did truly embrace what we were trying to do. So there was this value system struggle inside of me. And a headhunter called and said, hey, we have this, really big organization who's looking to start a diversity and inclusion initiative. They have nothing. Would you be willing to do it? So I do applaud my husband on this one. I moved him to southern Minnesota in the middle of the cornfields where there is not a lot of diversity. And I will say, Joleen, that experience was probably one of the best personal and professional developments that I had. But they just didn't know what they didn't know. A lot of people thought, oh, we don't need this here. Why did we hire you? I remember a conversation with an executive vice president saying, welcome, Laura. I don't know why we hired you. We're really, really successful. We were successful before you got here. And if you left tomorrow, we'd still be successful. So I said, whoop. Well, I'm not here to promote the extinction of the white male in the workforce, so you can breathe. But what I want to say is when you are a B2C business, what is the face of your business starting to look like? Does it look like it did 10 years ago? And are you going to become extinct because you're not keeping up with what's important and what customers want? And let's think about this as a strategic business imperative. I will say before he retired, he probably was one of the biggest diversity champions in that organization, but it took a lot and they didn't think that there was a value to have an employee resource group. Their HRC score, which I think you're familiar with, Joe, it's the Corporate Equality Index. It was a 15 when I landed in this organization. And the day I got there, they were talking that every employee gets a corporate calendar, a nice 10 by 13 wire bound, really nice, calendar for the fiscal year. And I said, oh, hey, we should add diversity holidays to the corporate calendar. It'll be a really nice way to socialize what kind of where we're going, what we're going to value, what things that we can talk about and learn. And so we added, the typical months, Hispanic Heritage, Black History Month. We did Pride Month and a National Coming Out Day and everything that was the typical diversity type holidays. And about a month later, the calendars came out, they all got distributed. And I came to work one morning, I opened my door and I had 13 desk calendars under my door with Sharpie markers that crossed out Pride Month. And I got a note and said, we are a Christian organization and this is unacceptable. So I picked up my little note and I walked down the hall to my boss and I said, I just got this note. I mean, he was red in the face. He had been there a lot of years and this was a whole new territory for him. And I said, look at this. He goes, well, we're conservative and we're Christian. I said, nope, we're a publicly traded company. And yes, we're conservative, but we can't say we're Christian because we have a lot of faiths that work here. Oh, what do you mean? And I said, yeah, we can't do this. You can't believe it. The phones are ringing off the hook. And, some of the retirees who also got these calendars are absolutely outraged. And our CEO is getting the phone calls. And later that afternoon, I was taking a trip with the CEO to one of our subsidiaries. And we got on the plane, the CEO, the COO, and the wheels weren't even up. And he said to me, let's talk about the elephant in the room. And I said, well, what is that? And he said, well, the calendars. And I said, okay, let's talk about it. Well, Laura, I'm getting all these phone calls. And I said, so when you hired someone to build a diversity and initiative platform for you, what did you think you were getting? And he got really quiet and said, well, I said, were you thinking only visual diversity? I said, well, yes. I said, okay, that too. I said, what's the problem? And he goes, well, the whole Pride Month. And I said, okay, at this point in time, it was several years ago, I said, this is a $934 million consumer market. Your CEI score is 15. So if I'm going to the grocery store and I'm going to decide whose bacon I'm buying, which do you think I'm going to buy if your score is a 15? It's up to you. If you don't want this consumer market or it's not important to you, that's fine. You know what? We can have that conversation. But if you really think that you want to grow the business and meet the needs of the consumers who are out there, we need to talk about this as a business decision. I am very proud to tell you, Jolene, that when I left that organization 3 years later, they scored 100 on the CEI score. So I feel like when you meet people where they're at and you help them understand where they need to go, it can be powerful.
One of the elephants always in the room is, how do white people make sure they are making meaningful contributions to inclusion and diversity? And I think this falls a lot on white men, really.
Yes. You know, a lot of times leaders or executives or folks that have a title next to their name are so afraid of saying the wrong thing that they say nothing. And silence is a really powerful tool, but it's interpreted inappropriately at times. And I think that we need to give permission, we need to grant grace. I would say if I assumed positive intent, most white men absolutely want to do the right thing, but they're afraid to ask because they don't want to make a mistake, they don't want to make a faux pas, and they don't understand probably the true value of privilege, which is interesting. We've had a lot of listening circles that we've hosted since the death of George Floyd, and the term of white privilege, especially from white men, bubbled up in a lot of the conversations. And for some folks, it was, hey, I worked 2 jobs, I was never privileged. I'll never forget one call in particular. Someone said, well, how often have you been pulled over for driving while Black? Do you ever get followed in a grocery store? Have you ever, been followed from store to store in a shopping mall because someone thinks you're going to steal something? Or has somebody accused you of trying to break into a very nice car that's yours because you're a different color and they don't think that you could obviously not afford this? Or you pay for an expensive dinner with an American Express and somebody tries to say that they want to report it as stolen. So it was just like example after example to help to say there's an automatic that you get to have because you are a white male. And how can we as a society help to hit that pause button and say, assumptions are made, and how can you be a louder voice in the room when you hear something inappropriate or when you see something inappropriate? How do you lead by example?
So, on a global level, I mean, obviously, you're doing all of the right things for the companies that you work for. How do we continue to keep the movement going? Or, I don't want murders to keep this in the public eye. How do you keep things in the public eye so we can make the changes that we need at a real granular level?
We have to continue to keep the dialogue going, and it is an everyday thing. And every one of us has a responsibility to be that inclusive person. You know, honestly, I don't care how old you are. None of us ever really leaves the 6th grade. We all want to be part of something. We don't want to be the last person chosen. We don't want to be the only one who isn't participating. People just want to be included. And every day we make a conscious choice, whether it's with our words or our body language, on how we treat somebody else. It's incumbent upon us. And for somebody who may say one person can't make a difference, always challenge that. You might be in a group setting and someone says something inappropriate, and it is your responsibility to call them out and really make that receiver of the not so good words realize that they have an ally. And that will have a ripple effect if we all do our part. We don't have to boil the ocean. We can just do that one thing that really matters, and collectively, we have an opportunity to change.
All those little changes are making a difference. And I'm really, really, really hopeful that the children that are growing up today can kind of see to really make things better. Do you have that kind of hope?
I do. And I think about where we started, Mike and I did, with my own parents and all of what they needed to go through. I'm super grateful that toward the end of their life, they were such an important piece of our family. Mike spent a lot of time with my mom and dad, and, my mom had dementia. So I remember when Barack Obama was president, and there was a TV screen in the little cafe up in Evlith that they used to eat at every day. And my mom jumped up and, just her little bit of mental challenge there. And she's like, he looks like my son in law. And I thought, wow, this would have never happened, 15 years ago. And, even on her deathbed, she just apologized for how much time was lost, but she just thought how lucky I was to have found someone so special. So I was grateful for that. And she passed before my dad did, but he had a very similar just disclosure throughout the end of his life too. Just grateful that we were able to come back together and how much he appreciated Mike for giving them the gift of grace and accepting them, even though they really gave him not such a good welcoming in the beginning, but we were able to really pull it all together at the end. So, I think people can change, and I'm just a champion of assume positive intent and, just continue to share stories because it matters. And I think at the end of the day, people really do want to be better. They're just afraid to ask and they don't know what they don't know sometimes. So when you have that little extra nugget or that extra piece of experience, share it. The world becomes a better place. So you're right. For my grandkids, I am prayerful that they won't ever have to experience what I did. So maybe Mike's and my experience paved the way for them a little bit.
As you know, I just think what you're doing is so important, and more than ever, it's necessary. It has to happen. Aside from that, you are seriously my most awesome cousin, and I adore you. And for all of those reasons, and just because, like, literally, you've been such an important part of my life for so long, you're a badass. You are the badass. You are my inspiration. So, why do you think you're a badass?
To be a part of other people's journey. I'm blessed that I have the gift to feel confident enough to be direct, to help redirect some folks who maybe make a misstep along the way. Some people aren't always appreciative of it. I get it, but I just believe in my heart that someday they'll say, "Ooh, yeah, I remember when." And yeah, I'm loving the ride. It's been a rough one. I think I got to have my personal journey because it's been so impactful to be able to help others. So you are an inspiration to me. I know where you started and where you've gone to, but you have walked the talk of being inclusive since you were the rebellious teenager whose home I moved into when I graduated. And I thought, you will change the world someday. And I listen to these podcasts and I think, yep, she is going to change the world someday. So, Jolene, I probably am more proud of you and what you've accomplished and how many lives you touch by the work you do. I don't know that you have a full understanding of the ripple effect. And the ripple effect is a gift, and it's your gift. You're just so generous with it. So I'm grateful.
Oh my gosh, you're making me cry. Well, thank you for being on the podcast. I mean, this is just literally my favorite podcast I've ever done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Lawyer Who Rocks. If you've enjoyed it and want to hear more from business badasses, make sure you hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. While you're at it, please give us a review. It really helps us grow the show. The Lawyer Who Rocks is produced and edited by Sean Fox and HMLG. A big thank you to Aaron Jones for our theme music, to Jeff Gilbert at Hairball Media for our graphics, and a huge thanks to my entire team at HMLG. If you need a lawyer who rocks, find us at hmlglaw.com. On the next episode, This podcast has been brought to you by HMLG. If you need lawyers who rock, visit us on our website at hmlglaw.com and be sure to follow us on social media platforms at HMLG Law. You can also follow me on Instagram at The Lawyer Who Rocks. Not with all the models.